Hey guys, so new Jeans Mama's legal team is trying to serve up high tea at the police station using yesterday's tea bags. According to her and her legal team, she has been exonerated. She has been found completely innocent of all accusations by HYBE because the police have stopped their investigation, saying that after 1 year of investigating, we have found no evidence that would lead her to be guilty for breach of trust. But the important thing to note is that the police don't say she's innocent of everything. They just say that they haven't been able to find, after a year of searching, but really were they working the whole time? But after a year of searching, they couldn't find any evidence that would lead them to conclude that she was guilty for breach of trust, whereas New Jeans Mama, of course, she's spinning this with her PR legal, every machine that she can still, punch buttons on, that she has been exonerated for everything and her bunnies are still following suit. And I don't know how many stray bunnies are still in that bunny patch, but they're still talking. So she's going around town like Moses parted the Red Seas for her and Jesus absolved her of all her sins, when we know that this is the same police department, the Yongsan Police Department, that interrogated Suga for 3 hours over a scooter. And did the Yongsan Police Department ever really bring her back in for questioning after they said that we didn't even get a word in because she just talk? And this is the same police department that was convicted of destroying evidence in relation to the Itaewon crowd crush, which they dropped the ball on. So New Jeans Mama is trying to have you think her tea is hot, but ain't nothing even in here. And them cookies that she promised that she would go along with your tea, ain't never coming. So the police issued a very short, simple statement with no specifics. And by law, they're not necessarily required to give you all of the receipts and the documentation and how they got to their conclusion, which makes it a really sus box that can be completely manipulated. But by law, the police, under the guise of protecting privacy, are not required by law to tell you all the details of how they reached the conclusion, but they are required by law to tell you the result of their investigation. And because of situations like this, because we don't know when the police are going to say, oh, we wrapped everything up and here's the result, and conveniently they wrapped everything up when it seemed like it, in the whole media cycle, Si-hyuk is in a little bit of a vulnerable position, which I still think he is not deserving of all of this hate, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But the police are required to just say what the result of this situation is. But you know what? This police and this police station in particular, because, we can say that there has been a lot of sus situations with the entire Seoul Metropolitan Police, but if you're saying like, well, that was the different office, different branch office had different people. No, this is the same one. The Yongsan Police Department was investigating Min Hee-jin, and Yongsan Police Department was the one that put Suga in that horrible situation where there was a whole press line and looking like that they coordinated with all of the reporters or allowed that to happen to embarrass Suga, BTS, and be part of this trumped up charge where he actually did have to pay a fine. And whereas, okay, Miss Min Hee-jin, no, nothing. They said that they couldn't find any evidence. And their lawyers didn't even say what the police actually concluded based on what. What the lawyers publicly stated was a very slick and sly way of massaging the public message by saying that, oh, well, we stick to our, arguments when she was talking to the police, saying that there was no way for a breach of trust to occur because she only owned collectively 20% of the company. So there's no way to steal a company if she only owned 20%. Now, this kind of confuses me because the police themselves should be the experts on the definition of stealing. You steal something that you don't have. You steal something that you don't own. And you steal, like when you take something that belongs to somebody else, and if it's registered under stealing, essentially it's a way where you took it where it was not possible legally. So she's mixing this metaphor up because had she had more than 20%, she had 50.1% of the company, she wouldn't be stealing the company at that point. She would just basically be taking it legally. And so in this situation, if you're just saying like, well, there's no way I could be accused of stealing or have, wanted to steal something or rob that house because the door was locked and I didn't have the key. So if I don't have the key, then there's no way for me to steal. That's the way that her argument is going. And that's the way it looks like the police department, hook, line, and sinker, believed her. On the other hand, to me, it also looks like this police department wanted to side with Min Hee-jin anyway, and they were just looking for just that opportune moment right now to just kind of shove it in there like it was a Jeffrey Epstein client list and just, remove themselves from this equation. So essentially, the breach of trust filings that HYBE made against Min Hee-jin last year to the police was part of the original set of actions that they started to take against Min Hee-jin. So perhaps at that point in time, they either didn't seem to know like whether if it was the most strategic thing to do, but it was something they could do to go to the police because maybe essentially this would be criminal in nature. But when you look at this whole contracty type of thing, the way that it's being played out right now in the court of law is a civil suit that's over the contracts. Now, the important thing to know here is that even though Min Hee-jin and her legal team may say that this whole thing is over and she's been exonerated, the way that she claimed that injunction last year exonerated her of everything. Oh my God, do not let her near a cotton candy machine. She'd have you believing that, you'd have like the key to Godiva. So the police can do an investigation and HYBE requested it and then on 2 counts about mainly stemming from breach of trust. Now, on the other hand, HYBE responded by saying that they're going to go to the prosecution. So the way that it works in Korea is that the prosecution and the police can do independent investigations. Usually it seems like they don't want to do that because it's like doubling up on work. So traditionally, the police would start the investigation. If it goes into criminality, the police start the investigation and then they hand it over to the prosecutors. And then the prosecutors can take all of the evidence, change the evidence or cut out evidence, investigate on their own, find new evidence, and then they're the ones that go to court and then try to put a punishment on the person who committed this crime. Sometimes the police, after they investigate, say like, no, we don't think there's anything illegal here, so it's not even going to go to the prosecution. And the prosecution can be like, well, the police said that there's nothing wrong, so we're gonna agree with them, and we're not going to move forward. However, the prosecution could also say like, well, we don't agree with the police. We're going to investigate on our own in this situation, and then tell you what's going to happen. So HYBE says they're definitely going to the prosecution because they say that when they made that filing with the police, after it, there were so many other developments and evidence that came up that make it almost like a slam dunk. So they're definitely going to the prosecution. And they're saying that, even the court has decided that Min Hee-jin's actions are very serious. So Min Hee-jin, New Jeans Mama, may have had her little pop-up store with the non-existent high tea at the police station, run a little bit of a game there. But if we look at the calendar of what's to come, there is just going to be an onslaught of court cases, the hearings that continue the court cases against her popping up. Still, I am a bit disappointed in the police because it does seem like they need to be investigated for breach of trust. On the one hand, I do see how investigating such a situation as this conflict with HYBE may not be in their wheelhouse because, they're dealing with real kind of not 100%, but I think their specialty would be more of the thefts and the, attacks and real physical, brute type of crime. And so maybe this whole financial crime kind of situation is more something that the prosecutors are much, more attuned with, sort of if you ask maybe an insurance adjuster to look at a murder case, that's not in their wheelhouse. It'd be more for the police. On the other hand, I'm just reminded in my mind, we went over many true crime cases in Korea where it was actually the insurance claims adjuster that was better at the investigation than the police. Remember the Psycho River killer who tried to use insurance fraud and then offed her husband with her boyfriend, together with her boyfriend, offed her husband, which was basically a sham marriage. She was just using him for money and then wanted to collect insurance on him. Well, the police, didn't really know. They thought oh, okay, I guess he drowned in the river. And they were kind of bumbling around. But when she pressed her case with the insurance company, the insurance claim adjuster, because they've seen one too many things go around the merry-go-round. So the insurance adjuster, I'm remembering in this case, went to the police and pressed it to go for a real investigation. And they found out this whole sordid affair where she is now serving prison time for this scheme to off her own husband so she can collect the insurance money. So maybe Bang Si-hyuk should look into an insurance claim adjuster to go take a, go sniffing around and, see. I bet they would be able to even find her laptop at the bottom of the Han River and do a disk recovery. And if you also look at another case involving a river in Korea, but this time the Han River itself with the whole SJM case, you can look at the whole series and the investigation that we went into there. That was almost a clear slam dunk case of the police actually colluding with a cover up. So scary and shocking. And, it's another part of life that Korean people have had to accept that there's nothing we can do about it. But then overall, it really erodes the trust in the system and in the police department, which we also depend upon and want to trust to ensure safety, law, and order. So this is a real betrayal of trust and public trust when the police themselves are the ones that need to be policed. Because with the SJM case, I am just remembering a very stark visual where the police themselves had their own press conference, announcing the mid-investigation results, which essentially was the final investigation because they never followed up with the final report that basically exonerated the suspect. And they still don't know to this day who did that to SJM. The police concluded, he just walked into the river himself because he was so drunk and then he just drowned. Nobody buys that. And so when they had their press conference, they did not inform the family of SJM. They had a press conference and they did not inform SJM's parents. The police did not inform SJM's parents that they were going to have a press conference of the mid-investigation results. And on that same day, the time block, the police finally said, you can review the CCTV footage. Because the family has been saying look, we want to see the CCTV footage of the park. You have been denying us for weeks. And then, wouldn't you know, suddenly the police said, come to the police station to check out the CCTV on this janky, TV that's flickering and not working. And at the same time, in another police station, clear across town, they were having their big press conference that exonerated the main suspect. So shady. So do I see much credibility in the police with their declaration that they couldn't find any evidence of New Jeans Mama being guilty? Of course not. Because even when they have evidence, they look the other way. Or in the Itaewon crowd crush situation, this exact same police department did not take responsibility for 159 people perishing for their lack of site management during that day. They were also found convicted of destroying evidence about that Halloween night that led to 159 people perishing and many other injured, and then the whole nation being traumatized. And this comes at a very suspiciously timed moment with Bang Si-hyuk going under another media play storm that, again, looks like it was just a re-dip in yesterday's tea bag or part of Project 1945's tea collection set that they already ran through, but then now they're just reusing the tea leaves, where the Financial Supervisory Service says that they are going to send Bang Si-hyuk's case, the investigation that they made, over to the prosecutors. So essentially saying that we think that he did something illegal. Now we're going to give it to the prosecutors. And in the process of the whole legal criminal system, the prosecutors have to then pick up the ball and then go, whether they choose to or not. If they choose to try to indict Bang Si-hyuk, they'll go to the court trial and then give him a punishment. And again, this whole situation was about whether he did or did not scam early IPO investors or people he gave stock options to out of their shares so that he could profit. So what he's being accused of is preparing an IPO, which obviously he has been preparing an IPO. It's just that whether the government can approve the IPO or not, he still had to wait on. So from his perspective, he was saying he can't say that the IPO is coming, even though he's trying to do it. But if he says, yes, the IPO will come in the fall because he thinks it's going to pass and get approved in the fall. But if it doesn't, then he could also get in trouble for misleading people, saying that it's going to come earlier than it did. And so he's being accused by the Financial Supervisory Service. There's no indication of who filed this with the Financial Supervisory Service, who is telling the Financial Supervisory Service to push this investigation. This Financial Supervisory Service is, kind of like the SEC, they're overlooking, making sure people, aren't doing sus stuff with the stock market and money and banks and the whole financial system to kind of keep that whole. And the person in charge of the FSS just finished his term, June 2025. It's a 3-year term. He started in 2022, Lee Bok-hyun. And this is really sus timing because in May, this started to heat up. Remember, it was oh, it is Bang Si-hyuk as the target, or it's not. It is or not. And then out the door, he's like, okay, we're sending it to the prosecution. If you want to, clap back, don't clap at me. I'm done. Out of here. That is the perfect time to accept a fruit box with a bunch of yellow notes underneath the apple styrofoam, the styrofoam holder with the apples or the pears. Not saying that he did, but this is exactly the perfect time to do it. And now there's an interim head who is running the FSS until a new person could be found. So that essentially means that it's easier to then find the staff members that you can bribe and have them push through the actions while they have no accountability because they're not in charge of anything, but they definitely are doing the actions that have an effect as if they were in charge. This is such a perfect time for like a Jezebel instituted treachery move. Remember Jezebel in the Bible? She wanted a vineyard that was next to her palace because her husband wanted it for farmland. Because, they got no refrigerators back then. So if you, grow your crops right next to your house, you can, easily pick what you need. But the guy was like, no, I'm not selling this. Well, Jezebel said that, oh no, I'm going to get that farmland. And what did she do? She made sure her ultimate goal was to get that owner of the vineyard offed. Yeah, executed under their laws. But how did she do it? She wanted him to be in public on a day of religious fasting. So hiding her crimes under a day of religious fasting. And she had the owner of the vineyard be in the seat of honor so that everybody would see. Then she planted 2 people who bore false witness and accused the vineyard owner of bad-mouthing the king. So in those days, that's off with your head. And according to the law, apparently, you have to have 2 witnesses. So in this case, this was a biblical lesson of like how Jezebel would use the law when it was convenient to her advantage in a manipulated way, found 2 witnesses, so-called witnesses, and attacked and said like, oh, that vineyard owner was really bad-mouthing you, the king, and everybody saw, and they had to act. And so then the king off with the vineyard owner's head, and then they got the vineyard. Okay. Now that, and when we see the Kakao Talk messages from New Jeans Mama saying like, oh, this is how you can really steal a company. Wow. Vineyard, Jezebel. Because we don't even have the number of victims in this situation, okay? We don't even have, like, who prompted this investigation. So they're trying to make it say, like, oh, well, it under just kind of us as a regulatory body, we noticed that this was super sus and we need to investigate it. Now, yes, right now, the climate, this is why also, like, this is how you are good at manipulating the public discourse when you have a strong like law firm, black PR firm, like not black the color, but like dark arts, PR firm, and ties to the government. This government under Lee Jae-myung, the new president, wants to really go after financial crimes. Why? Because the Yoon Suk-yeol's wife, her biggest thing right now, beyond, aside from the Dior bag that she took, is a stock manipulation scandal. So this is just an opportune time to kind of throw Bang Si-hyuk under the bus when everybody's eyes and attention and, they need to have somebody's head on a stick, to be accountable for like financial crimes. But it doesn't look like at all that there was like some like shady situation here. Yes, it looks like he may have done a deal with the private equity firm so that he was still able to cash out or get some sort of profit from the IPO more immediately rather than having to wait from the holding period. I think it was like 6 months or a year. Like other people can, buy and sell the stock, but the people who are the preferred investors in the beginning would not be able to sell their stocks right away because, then it could crash the price so that they would have to wait. But maybe, he wanted to buy a Maserati or something. It's a situation of like whether he really did violate the situation and mislead investors. Look at it the other way. If he responsibly waited to tell the public when the IPO would be after everything got approved by the government, and if he had told his employees that he gave stock options to, the early investors that bought stock options, of the date before the official announcement, then he would be accused of doing insider trading, which would be much more of a serious crime. So these people, we don't even know if they're actually complaining or this situation is just being used. And then somebody at the FSS was like told, hey, send him, to the prosecution. And the dude's probably like, well, I got only like a few weeks anyway. If you send me an Apple box, maybe we can talk. And so it doesn't make sense that he's being accused of wrongdoing when he was being responsible. And I find this as a common theme through this situation with the way that New Jeans Mama has successfully, in some ways, just flipped the script on each turn, where somebody's actions that were done in earnest and also responsible or truthful is then twisted as something where it's dishonest, and all her dishonest stuff has been twisted into I'm a victim, or I didn't do that, they did that to me, when she was the one doing it to other people. We're seeing the JIT run around, okay? And we're getting a little bit exhausted seeing this go into circles. But yet she is going to continue to do this because there is no rest for the wicked. So I think right now, Park Si-hyuk needs to go on a scorched earth campaign behind the scenes, a little bit classy with New Jeans Mama. I think he should start with calling in her loan for the stock options, because I doubt she paid him back. Maybe he could do a Judge Judy style, like little civil suit, talk about in his statements to the court how he really believed in her, showed all of the trust that he had in New Jeans Mama, going so far as to giving her such favorable terms for establishing her own company, taking a group from another subsidiary and then kind of straining that relationship with Source Music, giving the artist to her, giving her favorable stock options, even loaning her money to buy the stock options because she didn't have the money to do the stock options because of how much he believed in her. I will put all of that on the forms and then show point by point how so much of that trust had been betrayed. So even if the police don't believe that there was a breach of trust, well, in his case, where he's trying to get his money back from New Jeans Mama, which he is completely entitled to legally, he can also have all of his breach of trust statements there. And instead of him having his own press conference where, I don't know, maybe he's going to show up with a Red Sox cap or something, all he has to do is put it in his court filings that are then released to the public so that we can see how he feels and really start to get from his perspective how it felt to be so betrayed, so gaslit, so wronged by somebody he put so much trust in. And then I think he needs to throw in some shade like, please, at least if you're not going to pay me back, get us another laptop to replace the laptop that you never returned to us, because we scoured the bottom of the Han River and there's all sorts of junk there. We can't find it. And then maybe even add, hey, by the way, where's your shaman? Because we have to double check whether some of our employees are possessed by the spirit of her sister. We don't know which one it is. So guys, what do you think? Do you think the police really have exonerated New Jeans Mama of any guilt in this situation? Or do you think this prosecution is going to start turning up something else? Now the game is going to be on the prosecution's court. And it is a game now of who is going to be able to negotiate better, who's going to get the better fruit boxes over to the prosecution, HYBE side or New Jeans Mama side. So this thing is just about to get really started. All right, guys, put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.